Today is a special day to remember and worship Lord Narayana, Sri Hari in the form of Srinivasa. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is said that there are three important aspects of our interaction in this material world. One is we interact with our words and we can create a very pleasant or an unpleasant situation for ourselves and others. And we also interact through our thoughts about how we think about ourselves or about our situation and others, and also how we interact with our senses. Sometimes what we say, what we think, and what we act may not be very pleasant and may not create a pleasant situation for others and for ourselves. So Lord Brahma, once he was speaking to his son and disciple Narada, and he says how he ensures his words, his thoughts, and his actions are always creating a favorable and a pleasant and an auspicious situation for others and for himself. He says, Na bharati menga mrushopalakshate, na vai kvachin me manaso mrusha gatihi, na me hrishikani patantya satpathe, yan me hrudaut kantyavata druto harihi. How does he do that? Na bharati menga mrushopalakshate. Bharati here means statements or words. Mrusha means untruth or false or something that's not very pleasant. Na bharati menga mrushopalakshate. Mrusha upalakshate na bharati, na me bharati. My words, I ensure, are never false or never unpleasant, never untrue. Navai kvachin me manaso mrusha gatihi. In the same way, my manasa, my mind, mrusha gatihi, never goes into an unpleasant and undesirable thoughts. Navai kvachin me manaso mrusha gatihi. Name hrishikani patantya satpathe. Sat means eternal, auspicious, connected with the Lord. Asat means not, is temporary, undesirable. Hrishikani, hrishika means our senses. Patanti means to descend, to fall down. Name hrishikani patanti asatpathe. I ensure that my senses never degrade me or anyone else or in any situation. So how does he do this? He says, Yan me hrudaut kanthavata druto harihi. I ensure my words never fail, my mind never treads into inauspicious, undesirable thoughts, and my senses don't fail me, because yan me hrudaut kanthavata druto harihi, because I carry the Lord Hari in my heart with great zeal and enthusiasm. Yanme hruda autkanthavata druto harihi. To carry the Lord in the heart, utkanthavatha. Utkantha means with a great fervor, with a great sincerity, with a great desire, not just officially, ritualistically, as a matter of some kind of a duty or something, without our heart and application of mind and intelligence. So if we carry the Lord in our heart with great zeal, with great enthusiasm, how do we know we are carrying the Lord in our heart with great zeal? Prepared to do any kind of sacrifice for the pleasure of the Lord. That's an indication that we are very serious and earnest about it. And when we carry the Lord in our heart by following His instructions, by remembering Him always, remembering His instructions, chanting His holy names, worshipping Him, like on an occasion like this, we can carry the Lord in our heart always, and at that time, our words will never fail us. Our mind will always be filled with auspicious thoughts, and our actions will also be safe, auspicious, and secure. Great devotees carry the Lord in their heart always. And such great devotees are acharyas. They come to this world to teach us about the signs of God. They come to this world to teach us about love of God. And they come to this world to teach us how to intensify our love for God. Srila Prabhupada said he wrote several books, but primarily his books are three important categories of books. One was the Bhagavad Gita. He said the Bhagavad Gita teaches us the signs of God. Understanding about God is not some kind of a sentiment. There is a science, there is a logic, there is a philosophy. And Bhagavatam teaches us love of God. And the third set of books that Srila Prabhupada wrote was Chaitanya Charitamrita. And he said Chaitanya Charitamrita teaches us how to intensify our love for God. So these are three important literatures that Prabhupada wanted us to study and be absorbed in all our life. So, great devotees, acharyas like Srila Prabhupada always carry the Lord in their heart, and hence their words never fail, their thoughts are always auspicious and bring auspiciousness, and their actions never fail. There were some occasions that some of the disciples of Srila Prabhupada, in their interactions with Srila Prabhupada, they saw something very remarkable about Srila Prabhupada, who always carried the Lord in his heart. Once Srila Prabhupada was in Montreal. He was conducting an initiation ceremony, Diksha. Some of you may be familiar and are devotees, of course, of the temple, and followers of the temple are familiar. There is a process called Diksha, and we receive an initiation from the spiritual master. And at that time, our names are changed. Diksha is an indication that now we have a second birth. Our first birth is from our biological father and mother, and Diksha is a second birth where we consider the spiritual master as our father, and the Vedic literatures as our mother, divine mother. Now we are under the protection of the divine father and mother. That's the indication of Diksha. And hence, in the Vedic tradition, at the time of Diksha, a new name is given to us because it's supposed to mean a new life. Our thinking, our perspective of life, all of that is supposed to change on the basis of Vedic knowledge and the directions of the spiritual master. So there was this devotee. He had just become a devotee and he was in the temple for about a year or more. A Western devotee. And he had a Western name. And so his name was going to be changed. And those days Prabhupada would sit on the asana and not so many devotees were there. The movement became very big a few years later. So Prabhupada would sit on the asana and he would take the mala and he would chant 108 times on the mala in front of, as part of the ceremony. The Diksha would go on for a few hours. So he was chanting. And this devotee was called to the front and he came, sat humbly before Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada was chanting. But this devotee had heard there was one name of Krishna which he was particularly fond of. Madan Gopal. Somehow he was very enchanted by this name and he was hoping Prabhupada will give me that name. But of course you are not supposed to ask. Whatever the spiritual master gives the name, you should be happy with. But this devotee had a desire. So for many days he was meditating, I'm going to take Diksha and hopefully Prabhupada will give me the name Madan Gopal. So he sat and he was praying, Prabhupada, give me the name Madan Gopal, Madan Gopal. And Prabhupada kept chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram. And this devotee was praying, and then towards the end, so Prabhupada grabbed the mala and he said, so your name will be, and he was hoping, Madan Gopal. Prabhupada paused and his secretary was next to him. He turned to him and he looked at him and he said, is there a name, is there a devotee, have I given a name Madan Gopal to anyone? And the devotee had a list of names and he looked through the paper and he said, yes, Srila Prabhupada, you have already given that name. So he turned to the disciple who was anxiously waiting and he handed him the mala and he said, so your name will be Bharadraj Das. That's how he got that name. And the devotee was shocked. He had never told Prabhupada, he had never expressed this to anybody, but somehow mystically Prabhupada had figured that out. There was another occasion. Srila Prabhupada was in London. I have a few more minutes only. And Prabhupada, there were a few English devotees with him. And one sannyasi from some other organization from India was visiting and he came and met Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada got a nice asana to be offered to him. Very respectfully he received him and he told his disciple, bring a plate full of fruits, and the fruits was offered to him. And then Prabhupada and the sannyasi, they were talking in Hindi and the rest of the devotees couldn't follow anything and they didn't know what they were talking. And they were seated. And then suddenly Srila Prabhupada made a statement. No, my disciples also know Sanskrit. They are also learning Sanskrit. Maybe they were talking something, are you teaching your disciples Sanskrit or something like that? And then Srila Prabhupada turned to the devotee who had just brought the plate full of fruits. That devotee, somehow the last few months or so, he was chanting Ishopanishad verses, and he was practicing how to chant. Being Westerners, they had to learn a little bit how to chant Sanskrit verses. But he had learned how to chant only 6 verses. He didn't know beyond 6 verses. So Prabhupada was talking to the sannyasi and he said, no, my disciples also are learning Sanskrit. And he looked at him and he said, can you chant some verses, Ishopanishad verses? And so the devotee said, oh, yes, Srila Prabhupada. And he started chanting, Om Purnamadha Purnamidham Purnat Purnasya Mudachyate Purnasya Purnama Adhaya Purnameva Vashishyat. He started chanting and then after chanting the first verse, he looked at Prabhupada. Prabhupada said, continue. So he started chanting the first verse. The second verse, looking at Prabhupada if he's going to make any sign. And Prabhupada had closed his eyes and he was nodding and he was hearing his disciple chant, and the sannyasi was also watching with amazement that a Westerner is chanting Sanskrit verses. And then when he came to the 5th verse, he didn't know what to say. He was looking at Srila Prabhupada quite intently. He was full of anxiety. And then he came to the 6th verse. He thought, what's going to happen? My situation is almost like Draupadi's situation, going to be disrobed. And then there are 4 lines in the 6th verse. He came to the 3rd line. And then he was staring at Srila Prabhupada. And as he just completed the 4th line, Prabhupada said, enough. And he was greatly relieved. So, there were some instances like this in the life of Srila Prabhupada, that he was always directed by Krishna. Prabhupada wrote many books, about 70 books. And sometimes when the book would come from the printer, when it was just printed, he would spend hours reading the book. Then sometimes disciples asked, Srila Prabhupada, you only wrote that book. Why are you reading your own book? Prabhupada said, no, I did not write the books. Krishna dictated and I was just writing. So, great devotees, their thoughts, their words, their thoughts and their actions are fully protected and completely under the direction of the Lord. And because they carry the Lord in their heart with a great amount of enthusiasm and zeal. It's very nice that all of you are here, and the very fact that you have risen so early and come to the temple and participating in this festival is an indication that you also want to carry the Lord in your heart with great enthusiasm and zeal. So today is an important festival, giving us an opportunity to remember the Lord, to carry the Lord in our heart. Once Srila Prabhupada asked a few devotees who were with him, why do you think I wrote all these books? And then devotees gave different reasons. Prabhupada, you wrote these books to tell us about philosophy of Krishna, philosophy of Gita. Prabhupada said, no. So then someone else attempted. Prabhupada, you wanted us to teach us about bhakti. Prabhupada said, no. So different reasons they were giving. And somehow Prabhupada was not satisfied. He said no. And then Prabhupada said, I wrote all these books to convince you to chant Hare Krishna mantra. So chanting Hare Krishna mantra is so important. Lord's avatar in this yuga is in the form of the holy name. And Srila Prabhupada wanted us to chant the holy name. The scriptures and the acharyas, all of them recommend that we should chant the holy name.